Hello, and thank you for joining me for this reflection, which I actually gave for the St. Martin's service on Sunday, the 3rd of May. And it is a reflection on Psalm 23 and on John 10, which are the readings for the day, but in the light of the coronavirus. So this is what I said. We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequality, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. That was something I read, written by Brené Brown, who I've never heard of before, but somebody passed it on to me. As usual, you get these things on Facebook post. But she's right. The coronavirus pandemic may be an enormous threat, but it also presents us with an enormous opportunity to change the way we live, the way we eat, the way we travel, the way we treat one another, the way we structure the society in which we live, that is our health and social welfare services, our politics, our international relationships. On Wednesday evening, the Channel 4 News interviewed author and historian Francis Fukuyama. It was noted that populist and authoritarian governments seem to be growing in strength around the world. With the future looking increasingly uncertain, Fukuyama was asked what he thought would be the consequences of this pandemic. He answered that the political consequences could be terrible. As with the post-depression years in the 1930s, there could be increasing xenophobia, nationalism, and an anti-foreign sentiment. But alternatively, this could act as a wake-up call that helps people and governments realize that their social structures are way too unequal and that the social welfare systems are not adequate. But key to this, he said, is wise, caring leadership that is trustworthy, that relies on wise counsel and good governance. The metaphor for good, wise, compassionate and caring leadership in the scriptures is the image of the Good Shepherd. And this comes in several places in the writings of prophets, and famously, of course, in Psalm 23, which we've just read, and John's Gospel, chapter 10, from which we've just read. Although the verse where Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd," is later in the chapter. In the original language of Psalm 23, it is Yahweh who is the shepherd, not the much more dominating and masculine Lord. In the early faith of the people of Israel at the time of David and Solomon, Yahweh, the God who had led them out of bondage in Egypt, was both male and female. It was they who co-created the world. The feminine side of Yahweh was wisdom, the one who is the tree of life, the queen of heaven. She represents the mystical path to divinity and immortality. She is the water of life, flowing from the fountains in the heavens, like the 4 rivers flowing from the Garden of Eden. And all were invited to drink from her waters. Her wisdom was not to be found in religious institutions, says the person who penned the 8th chapter of the book of Proverbs, but along the wayside, along the path of living the ordinary life in the marketplace. Such a faith in God who is both male and female, is an empowering faith and not an overpowering faith. There's plenty of archaeological evidence to support this. The scriptural evidence is distorted because much of the early writings that came to be incorporated into the Hebrew script, into what we have as the Old Testament, that was the Hebrew scriptures, such as the story about the Garden of Eden and the serpent who tempts the woman in Genesis 2 and 3, were rewritten by the Deuteronomists. They were the religious elite who dominated Israel's religious life after Josiah's reforms 621 years before Christ, when they discovered the book of the law in the temple they discovered. They suppressed the feminine aspect of Yahweh, and the more masculine term Lord was substituted for Yahweh whenever it was found in a reading. However, we see the older understanding in the book of Proverbs, which I've just mentioned, and some of the prophets, and in the apocryphal books like Enoch and Sirach. Why they did this is very understandable. The Judah over which Josiah reigned was in a very insecure position between two superpowers. There was the constant fear of being taken over and being controlled by others. To manage such a fear, we either repress and dissociate from it, or we play the victim role. But another common response is to try and take control. That was the way that these reformers tried to deal with the threat. And that is the way that all authoritarian leaders take. And they are supported by fearful populations who like the sense of security these leaders give. We see that dynamic working today, and the COVID-19 epidemic has played into the hands of the far right. The Deuteronomists were the extreme right-wing expression of Judaism. They understood well that in order to have power over people, they needed to destroy the inner power of the people, which the feminine aspect of the divine gave them. Without the balancing feminine aspect of the divine, the masculine God becomes a dominating, distant God that demands obedience. He is a jealous lover, and to keep us safe demands that we separate from all that differ from us, because they are seen as a contaminating influence. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah take this point of view, but some of the post-exilic prophets, such as the second and third Isaiah, had a different view, and there is a debate in the Old Testament between different points of view going on. Theirs was a much more inclusive way. Unfortunately, the Church in the West, despite the inclusive and compassionate example of Jesus, reverted to this more male, one-sided view of God. Hardly surprising, because the Church had to survive in a predominantly patriarchal society. This was especially so once it became the religion of the state. And all types of religion that connected with a feminine God were suppressed or viewed as heretical. But in Jesus we do have the Good Shepherd, the leader who combines the strength and authority of the masculine with the tender, compassionate and inclusive love of the feminine. That is who we are called to follow. And this is the voice we need to recognize in today's world if ever we're going to come out of this crisis and stitch a new garment for humanity, one that fits all humanity and nature. And that is why I've chosen as an affirmation of faith these words written by Dorothy McRae McMahon. We believe in God who takes our smallest moment of hope and it grows it forth like a tree with spreading branches for the sheltering of new life. We believe in Jesus Christ who walks tall among us, seen in our faces, felt in our hearts and bedded deep in the longing of our souls, for all that is true, just and full of hope. We believe in the Holy Spirit who waits in our moments of openness and springs into the unknowns with joy and delight, that we might be called on beyond where we thought we could go, where every step is walked on holy ground. God bless you. Thank you.